The dining room smelled like pine needles and roasted chestnuts. Candles flickered along the center of a table set for 14. Crystal glasses caught the light. A fire crackled in the stone hearth. Outside, snow fell in slow, gentle curtains, the kind of snow that makes the world go quiet. It should have been perfect. It looked perfect, but perfection, as Elena Whitmore had learned over 7 years of marriage, was her husband's most practiced lie. She stood at the entrance of the dining room in a cream-colored maternity dress, one hand pressed gently to her swollen belly, the other resting against the doorframe. 8 months. Her feet ached. Her lower back had been a steady, dull fire for 3 days. But she had come because it was Christmas, because this was family, and because some part of her still believed that love, if you worked hard enough at it, would eventually find its way back to you. The room fell silent when she walked in. Not the warm, welcome kind of silence. Not the kind that happens when someone beloved enters a room and everyone pauses to smile. This was the other kind, the sharp kind, the kind that carries a warning. Her mother-in-law, Patricia Whitmore, sat at the head of the table in a deep burgundy blazer, pearl earrings, reading glasses perched at the end of her nose. She looked up, not with surprise, but with the slow, deliberate composure of someone who had already decided how this moment would go. "Elena," her voice was polished, distant, like marble. "We weren't expecting you." Elena blinked. Richard said dinner was at 7. I drove 40 minutes, Patricia. Richard said you weren't feeling well, Patricia replied. He said you needed rest. Elena looked across the table. Her husband, Richard Whitmore, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man whose photograph belonged on the cover of a financial magazine, sat beside a woman Elena had never seen before. Young, early 30s, elegant in a black dress with her dark hair swept off her neck. She wasn't a cousin. She wasn't a business colleague. She was leaning toward Richard with the ease of someone who had been leaning toward him for a long time. Richard looked up at Elena, and what she saw in his eyes was not guilt, it was impatience. "Elena," he said, setting down his fork, "I'll explain later. This isn't the right time." Explain later? 8 months pregnant, 40 minutes of driving through December snow, and the man she had given 7 years of her life to was asking her to wait. She looked at the table, at the 14 place settings, the crystal glasses, the centerpiece of white roses and holly. She looked at the faces of the people who had called themselves her family, some of them averting their eyes, some of them watching with the uncomfortable hunger of people witnessing something they know they will talk about later. And then, very quietly, Elena pressed her hand once more against her belly, against the child moving inside her, turning softly as if to remind her that she was not alone. She said nothing. She turned and walked back toward the front door. But what none of them knew, not Richard, not Patricia, not the woman in the black dress sitting in what used to be Elena's chair, was that the Christmas dinner they were about to enjoy, every candle, every pine arrangement, every bottle of wine, every roasted chestnut and sprig of holly had been paid for by a quiet bank transfer, processed 6 weeks earlier from an account in Elena's name, and that was only the beginning. To understand what happened that Christmas night, you have to go back to the beginning. Not to the wedding, though the wedding was beautiful. White roses in June, a string quartet, 400 guests, a dress that took 8 months to make. Not even to the engagement, though that had been the kind of story women saved in their hearts. A rooftop in Florence, a ring hidden inside a leather-bound copy of her favorite novel, Richard kneeling in the golden light of an Italian evening while the city spread out below them like a painting. Go back further. Go back to a Tuesday morning in October, 12 years ago, when Elena Carver was 24 years old and sitting in the waiting room of Whitmore and Associates, a mid-sized investment firm that had, at that particular moment in its history, been quietly hemorrhaging money for 18 months. She wasn't there for a job interview. She was there because her small financial consulting firm, barely 2 years old, run out of a 2-room office above a dry cleaner's, had been hired to do a forensic audit. Someone in accounting had been moving numbers, not dramatically, just carefully, patiently, the way a leak in a wall works, invisible until suddenly, catastrophically, it isn't. Elena found it in 4 days. She presented her findings to the board in a conference room that smelled like old carpet and fresh coffee. She was the youngest person in the room by at least 15 years. She wore a gray blazer she had bought on sale. She spoke clearly, without flinching, and she showed them, column by column, exactly where $400,000 had gone and how to recover most of it. Richard Whitmore had sat at the end of the table. He was 31 then, already carrying that particular kind of confidence that comes not just from money, but from the certainty that money will always be there. He had watched her presentation with his chin resting in his hand, and when she finished, the room was silent for a moment before he said, "Where did we find her?" It was the kind of line that, in retrospect, should have told her everything. Where did we find her? As if she were a thing, a useful discovery, a tool. But she was 24, and he smiled at her afterwards, and the smile was warm and real, and it made something in her chest feel like sunlight. They dated for 2 years before he proposed. Those 2 years were, Elena would later tell herself, in her most honest moments, the best part of the story. He was attentive then, curious about her. He wanted to know how she thought, what she read, what she saw to a balance sheet that other people missed. He called it her gift, this ability to see patterns in numbers the way other people see patterns in clouds. He took her to dinner and listened when she talked. He remembered small things, her coffee order, the name of her college professor who had first told her she had a mind for finance, the way she always ordered dessert but only ever ate half of it. She fell in love with his attentiveness before she fell in love with him. That was perhaps her first mistake. Because attentiveness, Elena would come to understand, is not the same thing as love. Sometimes it is simply the quality of a person who is very good at recognizing value and very skilled at acquiring it. They married in June, and Elena stepped back from her consulting firm. Not because Richard asked her to, not in words at least, but the requests came in other ways. "You don't need to take that client, we have enough. The firm is fine, Elena. Let someone else handle it. I need you at this dinner. The Hargroves will be there. It's important." She told herself she was choosing him, choosing their life. She told herself this for years. By the time she was 30, her firm had been quietly absorbed into a larger company, a deal Richard had facilitated. He had called it a smart exit. He had presented her with a check that made her eyes water and a glass of champagne, and he had said, "You built something real. Now let's build something together." She had cried happy tears that night. The check went into a joint account. She did not notice, not then, that her name on that account was secondary. What she did notice, and what she chose to file away in the careful, quiet corner of her mind where she kept things she was not yet ready to examine, was that Richard began to change after the firm was sold, slowly, imperceptibly, the way winter comes in some climates, not with a single cold day, but with a gradual dimming of light, a dropping of temperature so gradual you almost don't notice until one morning you find yourself wearing a coat. He stopped asking how she thought about things. He started telling her instead. He stopped coming home for dinner 3 nights a week, then 4. Business, he said, always business. And she believed him because the business was real. Whitmore and Associates was growing, expanding into new markets, attracting clients whose names appeared on the financial pages of newspapers, and she had built enough of her own professional life to understand that growth demanded sacrifice. She supported him the way she had once balanced ledgers, thoroughly, quietly, making sure everything added up. She managed the household with the precision of a project director, not because she had to, they had staff, but because she understood that a home, like a company, required strategy. She knew which of Richard's clients preferred red wine and which preferred bourbon. She knew his mother's birthday, his brother's anniversary, the names of his partner's children. She sent the right gifts at the right moments. She appeared at the right events, said the right things, wore the right dresses. She made Richard Whitmore look like a man who had everything in order. And she did it while, quietly, carefully, she began to rebuild. Not dramatically, not openly, just a small account here, a small investment there. Old contacts from her consulting days who still called her when they needed clarity on a number. A silent partnership in a restaurant owned by her college roommate. A real estate investment in her mother's name that had doubled in value over 4 years. She never talked about it with Richard, not because she was hiding it, but because he had stopped asking. The red flags, when she looked back, were never dramatic. They were domestic, small. The way he corrected her in front of guests, gently, always gently, but with a precision that made clear he wanted her to know she had been wrong. The way he referenced her former firm with a faint condescension she could only detect because she knew him so well. Your little company. He said it with a smile. She told herself it was affectionate. The way when they were with his family, she was the one who refilled glasses and cleared plates, while his mother and sisters sat and talked, and no one noticed, and Richard never noticed either. She had not let herself be angry about any of it. Anger, she had decided, was a luxury she couldn't afford. She poured that energy into something else instead. Then, 4 months into her pregnancy, something shifted. She had noticed it gradually. Richard's phone face down on the counter. Richard stepping outside to take calls. Richard coming home at midnight smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't hers, and explaining it away with a business dinner, a client event, a late night at the office. She had not confronted him. She had watched. She had watched the way her mother had always watched a difficult client, without revealing that she was watching, without letting them see the extent of what she understood. She watched, and she waited. And in the meantime, 6 weeks before Christmas, she made a quiet phone call to a family account, the one that funded the Whitmore Christmas gathering every year, an account that had been maintained for the past 4 years, not from Richard's income, but from a quiet annual transfer from an investment portfolio that was entirely, legally, and solely hers. She made the transfer. She said nothing, and she waited. The week before Christmas, it started to unravel. Not slowly this time, quickly. The way a knot gives. You pull one thread and suddenly the whole thing releases. It began with a phone call Elena wasn't supposed to hear. She had come downstairs at 2 in the morning, 8 months pregnant, perpetually thirsty, moving through the darkened kitchen with a familiarity that required no light. And she heard Richard's voice from the study, low and careful, with the particular softness he used when he was saying something he believed. "I know, Camille. After the new year, I promise." She stood in the hallway, one hand on the wall, the other against her stomach. Camille. She had heard the name before, once, months ago. A colleague, Richard had said, a junior partner at a firm they occasionally worked with. Elena had filed the name and moved on, because that was what she did. She filed things, she noted them, she waited for the full picture. The full picture arrived the next morning in the form of a text message that flashed across his screen while he was in the shower, and his phone lay on the kitchen counter. She didn't read it intentionally. She was reaching past it to pour her coffee. The text was from C, a single letter in his contacts, no last name, and the preview read, "Last night was..." The rest disappeared as the screen dimmed. She poured her coffee. She sat at the kitchen table. She breathed. This was how Elena Whitmore was built. Not to explode, but to absorb. Not to scream, but to understand. It had always been her greatest strength. It had also, she was beginning to recognize, been the thing that had allowed this to go on as long as it had. She did not confront Richard that morning. She called a lawyer instead. Her lawyer's name was Margaret Holloway. They had gone to the same university 20 years ago, and while Elena had gone into finance and Margaret into law, they had remained the kind of friends who didn't speak often, but who showed up completely when it mattered. Margaret was a partner at a family law firm in the city. She had handled 3 of the most complex divorce cases in the region in the past decade. She had a reputation for being, as her opponents put it, extremely thorough. "Tell me everything," Margaret said when Elena came to her office that Thursday. Elena told her everything. Margaret listened without interrupting, which was one of the qualities Elena valued most in her. When Elena finished, Margaret folded her hands and said, "You understand you have significant standing here." "I want to understand my options," Elena said. "I'm not ready to decide anything yet." "What are you waiting for?" Margaret asked. Elena placed both palms flat on Margaret's desk. Her stomach, enormous and low and full of the life she had been building with a man she now understood she had been building it for rather than with, pressed gently against the edge of the desk. "I want him to show me exactly who he is," she said, "before I decide what to do with the information." Margaret looked at her for a long moment. "All right," she said, "then let's make sure we're ready when he does." She didn't have to wait long. 4 days before Christmas, Richard came home early. Elena was in the living room reading, her feet elevated, a cup of chamomile tea growing cold on the side table. He came in with the energy of someone who had been rehearsing a conversation, and he sat across from her, and he said, "Elena, we need to talk." She looked up from her book. He was wearing his navy suit, the one he wore when he wanted to project authority. His hands were clasped between his knees. He had the expression of a man who believed that delivery was everything, that if you were calm enough, measured enough, composed enough, the content of what you were saying wouldn't hurt as much. "I haven't been happy," he said, "for a while. I should have said something sooner. I know that." She didn't speak. He took her silence as an invitation to continue. "I care about you," he said. "I do. You've been a good partner. You've been good for me, for the family, for the business. I'm not pretending otherwise." A good partner, like she was a business associate, like 7 years, a home, a pregnancy, a life. All of it could be summarized in the language of quarterly performance reviews. "But I'm not in love with you anymore," he said. "And I think you've known that for a while." He reached into the breast pocket of his jacket and set an envelope on the coffee table between them. "My lawyer drew these up. Divorce papers. I've been fair, more than fair. You'll be comfortable." Comfortable. That word. She looked at the envelope. She looked at him. "Comfortable," she said. It was the first word she had spoken. Her voice was very quiet, very even. Richard blinked, slightly unsettled by the steadiness of her. He had expected, what? Tears? Argument? The trembling lip? The shaking hands? This was a woman 8 months pregnant with his child, and he had just handed her divorce papers across a coffee table. And she was sitting there with the composure of a woman who had already known this moment was coming, and had spent some time deciding what to do when it arrived. "Elena, who is she?" Elena said. He paused. "It doesn't matter. Her name is Camille," Elena said. "She was at your Christmas dinner last night. I drove 40 minutes through snow to find her sitting in my chair." The color shifted slightly in Richard's face. It's complicated." "I'm sure it is," Elena said. She reached out and picked up the envelope. She turned it over in her hands once, feeling its weight, and then she set it back on the table without opening it. "I'll have my lawyer review these," she said. "Is there anything else?" He stared at her. "That's Elena. Aren't you going to say anything?" She looked at him, really looked at him, at the man she had driven herself to the airport to collect at midnight when his flight was delayed, who she had nursed through 2 bouts of pneumonia, who she had sat beside at her father's funeral and held his hand while he cried, who she had handed resources to when he needed capital, and she had provided it, quietly, without announcement, the way she did everything. She looked at him and she said, "Get out of my living room, Richard." He left, and Elena sat in the quiet for a very long time, one hand on her belly, listening to the particular sound the house made when it was empty of everything except her. 2 days before Christmas, Richard's mother called. Patricia Whitmore spoke in the careful, modulated tones of a woman who had spent 50 years being diplomatic about things she was not, in fact, diplomatic about. "Elena, dear, I want to speak with you about Christmas dinner." "Of course," Elena said. "Richard has told me about the situation, and I want you to know we all think the world of you. You've been wonderful for this family, but under the circumstances, we think it would be best, easier for everyone, if you didn't come to Christmas dinner this year." Silence. "Easier for everyone," Elena said. "It's just Camille will be there, and Richard, we don't want things to be awkward. You understand, surely?" Elena understood. She understood with a perfect crystalline clarity that would have been devastating if she were the version of herself who still needed this family to love her. But she had already begun, quietly and carefully, to stop needing that. "Of course, Patricia," she said. "I understand completely." Patricia sounded relieved. "You've always been so gracious. That's what I've always admired about you." After she hung up, Elena opened her laptop. She pulled up a spreadsheet, a quiet, private document she had been maintaining for 18 months. Numbers, accounts, investments, transfers, the architecture of her financial life, built carefully, legally, and entirely without Richard's name on any of it. She looked at the line that read, "Whitmore Family Christmas Account, Annual Contribution." She looked at the date of the last transfer. She closed the laptop. She allowed herself for the first time that day to feel something. Not anger, not grief, something quieter and more powerful. Clarity. Christmas Eve found Elena in a hospital waiting room. Not because of the baby. The baby was fine, warm and safe, and moving with that low, rolling rhythm that had become the most reliable comfort of her days. She was there because at 10 o'clock that morning, the pain in her lower back had sharpened enough to frighten her, and she drove herself, because there was no one to drive her, to the maternity ward for monitoring. The doctor said it was round ligament pain, stress, not uncommon at 36 weeks. "You need to rest," the young obstetrician said, with the firm gentleness of someone who had said this many times and been largely ignored. "Actual rest. No more driving in the snow. No more stress." Elena nodded. She did not tell the doctor what she had been doing for the past week, that she had been meeting with a lawyer, that she had been quietly reorganizing 3 financial accounts, that she had been doing all of this while maintaining the appearance of a woman who was simply waiting, quietly, for her life to resolve itself. She thanked the doctor, put her coat back on, and sat in the waiting room for 45 minutes before she trusted herself to stand up and walk to her car. The parking lot was half empty. The snow had stopped. The sky was the particular shade of gray that comes right before dark on a winter evening. Not black, not quite blue, just a flat, exhausted gray that felt like the sky had given up trying to be anything other than what it was. She sat in the driver's seat and did not turn on the car. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, and there, alone in a hospital parking lot on Christmas Eve, with no one watching and no one to be composed for, Elena Whitmore let herself feel it, all of it. The years of mornings when she had made his coffee the way he liked it while he scrolled through his phone. The evenings she had cleared rooms and organized dinners and remembered names and dates and preferences while he received the credit. The firm she had built, her firm, the one that had begun in a 2-room office above a dry cleaner's, the one she had grown with her own intelligence and her own labor, absorbed into his world and quietly erased. The pregnancy announcements she had imagined differently. The nursery she had painted alone because he was working late. The way she had explained his absences to herself with a language of love that was, she understood now, really a language of denial. She pressed both hands to her belly. The baby moved, a slow, deliberate roll, an elbow maybe, or a knee, pressing outward as if to say, "I'm here, I'm still here." Elena inhaled slowly. She thought about her own mother, a woman who had raised Elena alone after Elena's father left when she was 6, who had worked double shifts at a hotel front desk and somehow found time to attend every school play, every parent conference, every small and large moment that had made Elena feel seen. Her mother had never had what Elena had, the education, the money, the options. She had had almost nothing, and she had still built a life Elena was proud to have come from. "You come from strong women," her mother used to say. "Don't ever let them make you forget that." She had let herself forget. Not completely, but enough. A tear ran down the side of her nose. She let it. She didn't wipe it away. She let herself grieve the marriage, the version of herself who had believed she could love someone enough to make them worthy of it. The Christmas dinners she had organized and funded and attended as a guest in her own story. She let herself feel it all. And then, when the feeling had moved through her completely, she sat up. She wiped her face. She turned on the car. The headlights came on in the gray parking lot, cutting 2 pale beams through the early dark. She had a meeting with Margaret on December 26th. She had documents to review. She had decisions to make. But tonight was Christmas Eve, and she was going to drive home and eat the soup she had made yesterday and sit by the small lamp in the nursery she had painted herself. And she was going to talk to her daughter, because she had decided it was a girl, quietly, privately, weeks ago. And she was going to tell her that the world was not always kind, but that it was always, always navigable if you paid attention. She put the car in reverse, and she thought, they are sitting down to dinner right now. 14 place settings, crystal glasses, white roses, a fire in the hearth. They have no idea. But what Richard didn't know, what none of them knew, would change everything. Let's go back to a story Elena had never told her husband. Not because it was secret exactly, but because he had never asked. And there are some things that, when left unasked long enough, become something close to private. When Elena was 12 years old, her grandmother, her mother's mother, a woman named Dolores Carver, who had spent her life running a small but formidably competent property management company in the Northeast, had called Elena into her office. Dolores Carver was not a warm woman. She was sharp and practical, and she smelled like lavender and black coffee, and she saw the world in numbers the way other people see it in faces. She sat Elena down across the desk and said, without preamble, "You understand money. I've watched you. You have the eye." Elena, 12 years old, had not known what to say. "When I die," Dolores continued, "I am leaving you something. Not your cousins, not your mother. You. Because your mother is brilliant, but she trusts people too much. You don't. You see what's real. That's rare. Don't waste it." Dolores Carver died when Elena was 29, 3 months before Elena met Richard, as it happened. The inheritance was not dramatic by billionaire standards, but it was substantial. A portfolio of commercial and residential properties in 3 states, a series of long-term investment accounts that had been quietly compounding for 30 years, a stake in a small private equity fund that Dolores had co-founded in the early 1990s, and which had, over 3 decades, grown into something considerably more than small. Elena had never spoken about it to Richard, not because she was hiding it. It was in her name, entirely declared, entirely legal, but because she had understood, with the financial instinct her grandmother had recognized in her, that money known is money at risk, that the value of a position is often greatest when its existence is least advertised, that the person who shows their hand first is rarely the person who wins. She had told Margaret about it on their first meeting. Margaret had looked at the documents Elena placed on her desk and been quiet for a long moment. "He has no claim on any of this?" Margaret said. "None," Elena said. These accounts predate the marriage by 2 years. I kept them entirely separate. No commingling, no joint designation, no marital transfer. And the Christmas account? Margaret asked. Elena had smiled then, just slightly, just enough. That one is interesting, she said. The Whitmore family Christmas account was a tradition that had started with Richard's father, Gerald, a practical man who had set aside a specific fund each year to cover the cost of the annual family gathering. The venue or home preparation, catering, decoration, gifts, travel reimbursements for family members who couldn't afford to come on their own. Gerald had died 4 years ago, and with him, access to that fund. Patricia had mentioned it once to Richard. The account was depleted, Gerald hadn't maintained it toward the end. They would need to find another source. Richard had solved the problem the way he solved most financial gaps in his personal life. He had quietly transferred the responsibility to Elena without formally acknowledging that he had done so. He had assumed she was funding it from the joint household account. He had never looked closely enough to verify, because why would he? Elena handled these things. Elena had always handled these things. What he didn't know, what Patricia didn't know, what none of the 14 people sitting around that beautifully set Christmas table, eating roasted chestnuts and drinking good wine by firelight knew, was that for the past 4 years, every cent of the Whitmore family Christmas had been funded by a private account in Elena's name, an account drawn directly from her inheritance, from Dolores Carver's 30-year-old portfolio, from money that had never, for a single day, belonged to Richard Whitmore. Elena had not made this arrangement with any plan for revenge. She had made it because Richard asked her to handle it, and she handled it the way she handled everything, thoroughly, from her own resources, because that was simpler and cleaner, and because she was above all else a woman who liked things done properly. But the consequences of that arrangement, examined in the light of the divorce papers currently sitting on her kitchen counter, were remarkable. Margaret had been thorough. Over the past week, she had assembled a picture that was, at once, simple and stunning. The joint marital accounts were, by the time Margaret's forensic accountant finished their analysis, considerably less healthy than they appeared. Richard had been, over the course of 3 years, quietly restructuring his personal assets, moving money into accounts and entities his wife didn't know about, the exact same financial behavior that had first brought Elena into the Whitmore orbit 12 years ago, when she had been called in to audit someone else's creative accounting. The irony was not lost on her. But here was the sharper irony. While Richard had been quietly moving assets away from the marriage, Elena had been quietly building assets independent of it. And because she had never commingled her inheritance with the marital estate, and because Margaret was very thorough, and because Elena had kept records the way her grandmother had taught her, everything, every transfer, every receipt, every account statement filed precisely and completely, the picture that emerged was this. Richard Whitmore was preparing to exit a marriage with significantly less financial stability than his wife. The Christmas account was almost a footnote in this picture, a small symbolic detail in a much larger story. But it was the detail that Margaret kept returning to. "He banned you from a dinner you paid for," Margaret said during their December 26th meeting. "That's not just irony. In the context of what we're presenting to the court, it's a character exhibit." Elena looked at her. "I don't want this to be cruel," she said. "That's important to me. I don't want to destroy him. I want to be free. I want my daughter to be provided for. That's all." "I understand," Margaret said, "but I want you to understand something too." She slid a folder across the desk. "He has been working for the past 8 months to ensure that when this marriage ends, you walk away with as little as legally possible. He has done this while you were pregnant. He has done this while you were managing his family, maintaining his household, funding his mother's Christmas dinners, and building a child who will carry his name." Elena looked at the folder. She did not open it. "What do you need from me?" she said. "I need you to trust the process," Margaret said, "and I need you to be ready for January 15th. "What happens January 15th? Elena asked. Margaret picked up her pen. The board of Whitmore and Associates has scheduled an emergency meeting to vote on the new capital structure of the firm. Richard has been telling them for 6 months that he has secured a private investor for the expansion, a significant capital injection from an outside source to fund a new division. Elena went very still. That investor, Margaret continued, looking at her steadily, is a firm called Carver Capital Holdings. Elena held Margaret's gaze. And Carver Capital Holdings, she said slowly, is yours, Margaret said, 100% in your name from your grandmother's portfolio. The silent partnership has been managed entirely through a third-party administrator. Neither Richard nor his board has ever had reason to connect Carver Capital to Elena Whitmore née Carver. The silence in the office was absolute. Outside, the city moved. Taxis, footsteps, the low hum of winter traffic. Life proceeding at its ordinary pace, indifferent to the extraordinary thing that had just been said in this 7th-floor conference room. He went looking for capital, Elena said, and he found mine. Without knowing it, Margaret said. The board meeting is January 15th. They will be expecting a representative from Carver Capital to confirm the investment and sign the agreements. And what will they get instead? Elena asked. Margaret smiled. It was the first time Elena had seen her smile in 2 weeks. They'll get the truth, Margaret said, which is, in my experience, the most disruptive thing you can ever deliver to a room full of people who have been comfortable with a lie. January 15th arrived cold and clear, the way the best days sometimes do. The sky a precise, unambiguous blue, the kind of sky that leaves no room for misunderstanding. Elena dressed carefully that morning, not dramatically, not as a performance. She simply dressed with the same quiet deliberateness she brought to everything she considered important. A charcoal wool dress, elegant and unflashy, that fit her postpartum body with a clean, unforgiving line. Low heels, her grandmother's watch, a simple gold piece with a leather strap that told time with the same absence of ornamentation its original owner had valued. Her daughter, Nora, she had decided the night after Christmas, sitting in the painted nursery with a sleeping infant against her chest, was with her mother for the day. She drove to the Whitmore and Associates building alone. She had been to this building hundreds of times. She knew the security guard's name, David, and his daughter's name, Lily, and that Lily was applying to dental school. She knew that the elevator closest to the reception desk ran slow, and the coffee on the executive floor was better than the lobby brew. She knew this building the way she knew the marriage it had been built around, intimately, practically, with the knowledge of someone who had invested in it far more than had ever been formally acknowledged. She took the elevator to the 14th floor. Margaret was already there, standing outside the boardroom with 2 associates and a document case that had the particular dense weight of a folder packed with evidence. She looked at Elena as she stepped off the elevator. "Ready?" Margaret asked. "Yes," Elena said. She had not told Richard she was coming. This was deliberate, not cruel. She did not want cruelty. But she had learned from 12 years of watching Richard operate that the power of information is entirely in the timing of its delivery. Surprise delivered in the right room with the right documentation was not an act of aggression, it was an act of clarity. She straightened her grandmother's watch against her wrist. She walked through the boardroom door. The room was full. 10 board members sat around the long conference table, the kind that announced its own importance simply by existing. Richard sat at the far end, in the chairman's position, in his navy suit. Beside him sat the firm's CFO, a man named Douglas, who Elena had once helped navigate a quarterly shortfall with a patience he had never properly thanked her for. Legal counsel was present, 2 advisors from the external firm handling the capital expansion, and at a small side table near the window, a man Elena recognized as the third-party administrator of Carver Capital Holdings, the one person in this room who knew exactly what was about to happen, who had been quietly briefed by Margaret the previous day, and who was doing an admirable job of looking calm. Richard looked up when Elena walked in. The expression on his face was one she would remember for the rest of her life. It was not anger, not yet. It was the particular suspended expression of a person whose understanding of a situation is being revised in real time, like a photograph developing in solution, the image emerging slowly, feature by feature, into something you did not expect. "Elena," his voice was carefully controlled. "What are you doing here?" She took a seat at the table, not beside him, not far from him, simply at the table, a chair she was entitled to occupy. "I represent Carver Capital Holdings," she said. The room went quiet in the way that rooms go quiet when something important is happening and no one is yet sure what it means. Douglas frowned. "Carver Capital is, their representative is." "I am their representative," Elena said. She opened the folder in front of her and placed a document on the table, a clean, single-page summary that Margaret's team had prepared with the precision Elena's grandmother would have approved of. Carver Capital Holdings is a private investment firm. It is wholly owned by me. It has been, for the past 4 years, the silent capital source behind 3 of your firm's recent acquisition deals, including the Harrington portfolio and the Northeast residential expansion. She heard Richard's breath change. She did not look at him. She addressed the board. "I want to be clear about why I'm here today," she said. Her voice was steady, absolutely steady. "I am not here to be disruptive. I am here because I have a legal and fiduciary responsibility as the owner of the firm's prospective primary investor to ensure that the terms of this capital agreement are transparent, fair, and properly understood by all parties." She placed a second document on the table. Margaret stepped forward and placed a set of documents before each board member, 12 copies, perfectly ordered. The room rustled with paper. Eyes moved across pages. Foreheads creased. Douglas looked up first. This is an audit. Internal transfers. Richard, these accounts are being reviewed," Margaret said in her calm professional voice, "as part of the due diligence process for the Carver Capital investment. It is standard practice when a new primary investor enters a firm to conduct a complete review of internal health. As you'll see on page 3, there are several transfer records from the past 18 months that will require explanation before the investment can proceed." The room was no longer quiet. It was the particular kind of not quiet that is still mostly silence, but charged, shifting, alive with the sound of understanding arriving in unwelcome ways. Richard stood up. "Elena," he said, and now his voice had the edge she had always known was beneath the polish, the edge of a man unused to being outmaneuvered. "You can't do this. This is my company." "It's a board-managed company," Margaret said, "with fiduciary obligations to its investors. Miss Whitmore, or Miss Carver as the legal documentation reflects, is acting within her rights as a named investor and representative of the firm's capital partner. She's my wife, your soon-to-be ex-wife," Margaret said, "who has filed for divorce effective this morning, citing documented evidence of marital misconduct, asset concealment, and financial bad faith during the marriage, which are matters the board may also wish to consider when evaluating the leadership of this firm." Richard turned to his legal counsel. His legal counsel, to his credit, did not look away, but he had the expression of a man who wished he was somewhere else. The board was reading page 3, page 7, the account transfers, the offshore rerouting, the careful, patient dismantling of a marital financial estate by a man who had assumed his wife was paying attention to the nursery instead of the numbers. Elena watched them read. She did not say, "This is what you get for banning me from a dinner I paid for." She did not say, "This is what happens when you mistake someone's silence for ignorance." She said nothing. She simply sat at the table, upright, present, her grandmother's watch on her wrist, and allowed the truth to occupy the room at whatever pace it needed. Richard sat back down. His face had gone the color of old concrete. Across the table, Douglas looked up at Elena. "How long have you known?" he said, not accusatory, genuinely asking. "Long enough," Elena said, "to do this properly." Douglas nodded. He nodded the way people nod when they recognize competence they should have recognized sooner. Richard's voice came quietly from the far end of the table, stripped of its edge now, just a voice. "Elena, we can talk about this. We can work something out." She looked at him one final time, and she thought of the parking lot on Christmas Eve, the gray sky, her forehead against the steering wheel, the baby moving inside her. She thought of her grandmother, who saw something in a 12-year-old girl that she had decided was worth protecting before that girl even knew she needed protection. She thought of her mother, working double shifts at a hotel front desk, never missing a school play. She thought of Nora. She said, "The board has everything it needs. Margaret will coordinate with your legal team for next steps. I'll expect the asset disclosure by the 22nd. She stood. She gathered her folder. She said, "Good morning, gentlemen," and she walked out of the boardroom. The door closed behind her with the quiet, definitive sound of something ending. She sat in her car for a few minutes before she started the engine, not crying this time, not trembling, just sitting in the clear January light, breathing. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Richard's number already. It showed a text from her mother. "Nora is perfect. She just smiled at me. Come when you're ready." She looked at that text for a long time. "Nora is perfect." She typed back, "On my way." In the weeks that followed, the story settled into its proper shape with the tidiness that real life, when treated with sufficient patience and precision, sometimes allows. The board of Whitmore and Associates placed Richard on administrative leave pending a full internal financial review. 2 of the board members Elena always found sharp and fair, men who respected her when she appeared at company events and who, she suspected, noticed things they'd never said out loud, reached out to Margaret with questions about the Carver Capital investment and the possibility of restructuring the firm's leadership going forward. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Richard's concealed assets, now documented, shifted the legal calculus dramatically in Elena's favor. He had structured everything assuming she was not paying attention. He had been wrong about that, the way he had been wrong about a great many things. The final settlement was fair. Elena had insisted on that. Not generous to her beyond what was right, just fair. A fair division of the marital assets. Appropriate child support for Nora. Medical costs and educational provisions that would ensure her daughter grew up without the particular anxiety that comes from financial precariousness. She did not take his company. She could have. Carver Capital's position gave her leverage that, used aggressively, could have been genuinely devastating. But she had meant what she said to Margaret. She did not want destruction. She wanted freedom. There is a difference, and it is not always easily maintained when you are hurt enough. But Elena had always been a woman who understood the difference between what she could do and what she should do. And she had learned over the past weeks that dignity is not a restraint on your power. It is your power. Patricia Whitmore called in February. She called at 11 in the morning on a Tuesday, and when Elena answered, there was a long pause before Patricia spoke. "I owe you an apology," Patricia said. Her voice was smaller than Elena had ever heard it. "Several of them, I think." Elena sat down in the kitchen. Nora was asleep in the next room, small and warm, and utterly indifferent to the complexities of the adult world she had just arrived in. "I didn't know," Patricia continued, "about the account, about the Christmas. I didn't know any of it." "I know you didn't," Elena said. "How long were you paying for it?" 4 years, Elena said. Another pause. "Elena," Patricia said, and her voice had broken slightly now, the polish giving way to something underneath it that was genuinely sorrowful. "I'm sorry you were ever in a position where you had to do that quietly, without acknowledgement, without—" "Patricia," Elena said gently, "you don't have to do this." "I want to," Patricia said. "I know, I believe you," Elena replied. A long, careful quiet followed. "How is she?" Patricia asked finally. "The baby." Her name is Nora, Elena said. She's extraordinary. I'd like to meet her, if you'd allow that someday. Elena looked out the kitchen window at the February yard, the bare trees, the patches of old snow, the first faint suggestion at the very edges of the branches of the green that would come. Someday, she said. Yes. She went back to work in March, not in the same way she had worked before, not as someone else's silent infrastructure, not as the invisible engine behind someone else's visibility. She reopened her consulting practice under a name that felt like a homecoming, Carver Financial Advisory. The name on the door was hers. She was not trying to prove anything. She was not making a statement. She was simply doing what she had always done in the way she had always been best at, without apology and without concealment. Her first client was Douglas from Whitmore and Associates. He sat across her desk in the same chair where, 12 years ago, Elena had sat across from his conference table and found the numbers that had first brought her into that world. You know, he said, I always thought it was Richard who was the sharp one. Most people did, Elena said, with no particular bitterness. Douglas had the grace to look uncomfortable. We should have paid more attention. Yes, Elena said, you should have. She opened her laptop. Shall we begin? That summer, Nora learned to hold her own head up. She was 4 months old, and she accomplished this feat one morning in June while Elena held her, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor in the house that was now, unambiguously and entirely, Elena's. Nora pushed herself upright with the furious, concentrated effort of someone who had been intending to do this for some time and had finally decided today was the day. She looked at Elena with the enormous, wondering eyes of a person who had just discovered that the world, when you hold your head up, looks completely different. Elena laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere below deliberateness, that was just pure, uncomplicated joy. There you are, she said softly to her daughter. There you are. There is a version of this story that is about a husband's cruelty. There is a version that is about a wife's revenge. But Elena Whitmore, Elena Carver, would tell you that it is really about neither. It is about what happens when a woman decides to stop making herself smaller so that someone else can feel larger. What happens when she takes the intelligence and the patience and the extraordinary capacity for care she has been pouring into the wrong places and redirects it toward herself, toward her child, toward the life she actually wants. It is about the particular kind of power that doesn't announce itself, that builds quietly over time in private from what is real rather than what is performed. The kind of power that doesn't shout, that doesn't threaten, that simply, when the moment comes, is. The Christmas dinner happened without her. It was beautiful. 14 people, crystal glasses, white roses and holly, a fire in the stone hearth, and every candle, every pine branch, every bottle of wine, every roasted chestnut, paid for by the woman they sent out into the December snow. She was not there, but she was everywhere. On the night before Nora's first Christmas, Elena sat in the nursery, the one she had painted herself, in the careful pale green that had taken her 3 tries to get right, and she held her daughter in the quiet and the warmth, and she thought about her grandmother. You have the eye, Dolores had said, to a 12-year-old girl who didn't yet know what that meant. Don't waste it. Elena looked at her daughter's face, round and serious and completely, entirely new to the world. You have it too, she said softly to her daughter. You have it too. You don't have to fight. You don't have to be loud. You don't have to make yourself anything other than what you are. Just pay attention, she said, and when they underestimate you, and they will, let them. Let them be comfortable in their assumptions. Keep your records, build what is yours, and when the moment comes, she kissed her daughter's forehead. Walk into the room. Outside the window, the first snow of the season was falling. slow, gentle, in no particular hurry. The kind of snow that makes the world go quiet. Elena watched it fall, her daughter warm and breathing against her chest, and she felt, not the happiness of someone who had won something, but the deeper, steadier feeling of someone who had found their way back to themselves. That feeling has no drama in it. It doesn't make for the moment people put in highlight reels. It is not the boardroom revelation, or the divorce papers, or the Christmas dinner that told the wrong story for years. It is just a woman and her daughter, and the first snow, and the particular warmth of a room that belongs entirely to the two of them. It is enough. It is, in fact, everything. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone or of yourself, or of a moment when someone underestimated what you carried, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing a person can do is simply refuse to be what someone else decided they were. We'll see you in the next story.